Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. This is UFO Disclosure 2019. The Storm. Yes. Now, why have I called it The Storm? Well, there's a clue in the title shot, the thumbnail for this particular video. But I'll explain as I go along, because the storm in this case has two meanings. But anyway, it's how long has it been since the last UFO Disclosure video? A month or so? Quite a long time. A lot's happened since then, which is why I'm making this video. I've been talking about making this particular video for an awfully long time. The other things have got in the way. It's something I probably would have made a couple of weeks ago if it hadn't been for other things. However, things have happened since then, which I think make me glad I waited a little while, because I'd have only had to do an update then. So anyway, we're all ready. Russell, are you ready? See, Russell's on the case. He loves these videos. So first and foremost, we're just going to go through some of the exopolitical and ufological news that have been going on since the last programme. So check that out. Like I said, there's a lot to cover, and there's an awful lot of different things that have come from different sources and different areas. So, very interesting times, I think. Before we go any further, I wish you all a happy World Disclosure Day 2019. Right, well, that was actually a week ago, but belated. Now, World Disclosure Day is July the 8th. It was awarded that status by Steve Becklow and Jeffrey Wetz to the Paradigm Research Group in 2010. This is because it was on July the 8th, 1947, that General Roger Ramey held his infamous press conference in Fort Worth, Texas, where he put on display some wooden sticks and some loose, crumpled pieces of aluminium foil and told the world's media that this is what Major Jesse Marcel, highly trained intelligence officer from the Roswell Army Air Force Base, had mistaken for a flying saucer. And he was lying, and the government is still lying 72 years later. Now, many believe, including Steve Bassett, that this is when the truth embargo began, and of course all the reporters were pouring into Fort Worth and Roswell on the flying disc story that had come out that same day earlier on, and well, I don't know. That's when they decided to cover it up. But mind you, I think the cover-up began much earlier for reasons I've explained in other videos, many times, and that's what happened. Was the reason the flying disc story came out was actually a big cock-up by Colonel Blanchard and the other people at Walter Houghton and these other people at the base. But whatever the reality is, I mean, there's many reasons. I've been into this before. I'm not going to repeat myself. There's many reasons for thinking the cover-up was already in place when Roswell happened. But it doesn't matter. It's still the scene in General Ramey's office. It's a fitting and symbolic historic moment that illustrates the truth embargo very well. So I think it's quite right that every July the 8th we now have World Disclosure Day. And of course, I know that's just 6 days after World UFO Day, because on the 2nd of July, it was actually the same year, 47, that Kenneth Arnold saw his famous sighting, saucer skipping on a pond, and the term flying saucer was born. Now, the date of World Disclosure Day will remain every July the 8th until disclosure actually happens. Then the day will automatically switch to that date. So, will next year's World Disclosure Day be on a different date? We'll soon find out. It might even be this year. We might get two in 1 year. We'll see. But anyway, whatever it is, have a happy one. Right, now this is one of the most significant things that happened in the last few weeks when it comes to UFOs, and that's Trump. Now, of course, the title of this particular UFO disclosure video is The Storm, and that has a double meaning. I'll come on to the second meaning in a minute, but the first meaning, of course, it does refer to Trump, the storm and QAnon and things like that. You know, the relation between the term The Storm and Trump. But first of all, this is Tucker Carlson. Now, Tucker Carlson's kind of he's kind of an American Piers Morgan, I suppose. He, come to think of it, Piers Morgan's been exported, hasn't he? So they've got him as well. So he's like a native American Piers Morgan, or one born there, you know what I mean? Anyway, he presents a program called Tucker Carlson Tonight on Fox News. It is at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the easternmost time zone in the United States of America. I don't normally watch it, of course, because it's firstly not much on there as interests me, but also it's kind of like it's usually between midnight and 1 p.m. Sorry, midnight and 1 a.m. where I am, and I'm not willing to stay up that late. But I did stay up this late because On this particular program, Tucker interviewed President Trump. He interviewed President Donald Trump, and the subject of UFOs came up. And this is what the president had to say.
You gave an interview the other day in which you said you've been briefed on unidentified flying objects. Are they real?
Well, I don't want to really get into it too much, but personally, I tend to doubt it. I mean, you have people that swear by it, right? And pilots have come in and they said, and these are pilots that are not pilots that are into that particular world, but we have had people saying that they've seen things. I'm not a believer, but, you know, I guess anything's possible.
We spoke to a government official recently who said the U.S. government had wreckage from a UFO in a facility on an Air Force base. Are you familiar with that?
I haven't heard that, no. I haven't heard that. It has not been within government, has not been a big thing, but I've seen it. I've seen it on your show, but I've seen it. I don't assume it's correct, but, you know, I have an open mind, Tucker.
No, you do, Mr. President. Thank you for that.
Nowadays, you can believe anything, right?
True.
Now that statement has disappointed many people. I mean, UFO Jesus was, he did a video just a few hours before that was going to come on, just saying, wow, you know, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. Will we have disclosure with a capital D tonight? Will we enter the post-disclosure world? I love that guy, he's so funny. And he's got real style. But of course it wasn't quite that. And some people have sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, ugh, waste of time. It's not, though. I mean, if you actually analyse what President Trump's saying in detail, you'll find that, believe it or not, that's probably the most candid thing a US president has ever said about UFOs since Jimmy Carter. For example, he admits that he's been briefed. Firstly, he doesn't just smile and laugh. I mean, this is what Obama did, this is what Clinton, I know Clinton went on Jimmy Kimmel after he was president, and he sort of like, what he said there I've covered in a previous installment of this series of films. When he was president, he said very little. He had that when he said, I had a letter from Ryan in Belfast, and he asked, Mr. President, are there aliens in Area 51? And I said, Ryan, I have no idea, but if there are, I want them to tell me. Well, anyway, the fact of the matter is, that was just a joke. I mean, Steve Bassett says, oh, he's secretly signalling to the truth embargo. I think he was playing his role within the truth embargo, quite frankly, and just turning it into a bit of a laugh. I mean, Ryan is an 11-year-old boy, and Clinton mentioned that Ryan is 11. This 11-year-old kid from Belfast just wrote to him and just asked him the question. Of course, I want to ask him, but of course, but you know, other leaders have made similar jokes. I mean, look at David Cameron. David Cameron was directly challenged by Richard D. Hall of Rich Planet on this issue when he was campaigning actually to be elected as Prime Minister, and he just sort of like, oh, he just made a big, rather a very demeaning joke out of the whole thing, which is standard, it's typical. And in fact, Robert Fleischer, the German ufologist, had done the same thing with not with Angela Merkel, one of the other people in government. I mean, Angela Merkel probably couldn't get a coherent word out now. She can hardly stand up straight. But he challenged a government official on this, and the same thing happened. Just have a laugh, make a big joke out of it. What Trump said here is, I think, one of the most, as I said, the most extraordinary thing we've had since Carter that any president has said about UFOs. He didn't laugh, he didn't joke, he said, I've been briefed. He said, I've been briefed. Then he said he's not a believer. He says, do they exist? I doubt it. Well, that's not true. That's a lie. It has to be. There's absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way that Trump could have been briefed on this subject, which I knew he'd been briefed on it even before he admitted he'd been briefed on it, and then said, I don't believe in them, I doubt it. There's absolutely that is not possible with the amount of evidence that's available. I'm not just talking about the TTIP stuff, which I'm going to go into at the end. Even leaving that aside, imagine that TTIP had never happened. It's still inconceivable. Look at the citizen hearing on disclosure. It was an open and shut case. It was 5 days of a complete one-way street. The ex-Congress people, they had to admit at the end, none of them doubted it for a second once the evidence had been presented to them. And I found Trump evasive. He wasn't his usual eloquent and robust self during that interview with Tucker Carlson. I mean, he must have known he was going to be asked on this subject, but you could tell he still felt uncomfortable. He tripped over his words a few times. He was evasive, which is unusual for Trump. Very unusual for Trump. He's been asked about all kinds of other things. I mean, people have asked him all kinds of stupid questions, like whether he'd heard of have you heard of David Duke and things like this. And he gave much more suitable responses. Even when he was challenged over his indiscretion on reality TV, he gave very, very articulate, very, very smooth, very, very well thought out and eloquent responses. He's obviously uncomfortable with this idea, and he's not stupid and he's neither complicit, so something else is going on here. And I believe we're going to hear more from President Trump about UFOs in the near future. That's why the term storm has a double meaning in the title of this particular video. Now, Tucker also mentioned that, have you heard reports of wreckage being kept by the government, UFO wreckage in possession of government agencies? And he said, no, I haven't heard. I've not heard of this. Well, not possible. Not possible if the stuff that, again, it's not, leaving aside TTIP, the evidence is there for it. I mean, not only that, even if you take into account TTIP, we have, of course, Bob Bigelow and his involvement with TTIP, and the fact that he was involved with it all along. He never told anyone. Obviously, he was doing it secretly. But his job was actually to store these things in a hangar. These very, very strange things, which the government was spending a lot of money on it. Now, these are things of which there are photographs of them. I mean, it's not. I think there's more to be said about this to confirm that this actually happened, and I'll be saying more about that later. But the idea that Trump didn't know anything about this and had not been told, I don't buy that either. So all in all, it's very, very interesting. I think, well, for whatever Trump wants to reveal about this subject, and I think he does. I'd love to see Peter Hyatt of Rich Planet get involved in what Trump was saying. Whatever he wants to reveal, it's not the right time to reveal it. But I get the feeling Trump does want to. If Trump, like I say, compare what Trump said to what other presidents have said. Those who are involved in covering up, it's it's, and then they make some kind of quip, like Cameron did. Yeah. Remember my Obama disclosure video? No, yeah. I think Trump is heading in the right direction. Whether he keeps going the right direction, which I hope he will, obviously, we'll see. But I think we've got a good chance. And of course, following President Trump's statement on UFOs, there's only one thing any news company and any news program can do, isn't it? Yeah. It is the inevitable and ubiquitous interview with Nick Pope. You just can't get away from it, can you? You have to do it. It's a law. So Nick Pope came on and he gave his tuppence worth. And I'll tell you what, he said all his usual, what are they? The government are dealing with things, these new Navy stuff, are they? What are they? They're dealing with this sort of thing, can't rule it out, can neither confirm nor deny, etc., etc. So he didn't, as usual, he gave his usual piece. But then he did actually say something quite interesting. He said that, I won't actually play you the video clip, but he did say that he made the same point that I have done, that the way UFOs are being portrayed in the media and the way they are being presented has changed. Now, I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing yet, and I don't know exactly how much this guy knows about it and what his own role in that is, but I can guess it's not positive. However, he's right. That is exactly what's happening. Right, now this is probably the most remarkable thing that has happened in the last month in the UFO disclosure area. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was a hoax. It's a new document that came to light. It could be one of the most groundbreaking in history. It was released by, well, supposedly the author is a scientist, allegedly, he hasn't confirmed this, who is involved with NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, founded by Robert Bigelow, famous for the Skinwalker Ranch project. Now, this guy, the author, is also associated with Hal Puthoff, who's involved in the To the Stars Academy. But well, I'll come on to that in a minute. But anyway, it's just 15 pages long, but there's a huge amount to analyse within its few leaves. The document is primarily the rough minutes of a meeting between a scientist. This is the author, the alleged author of the document, Dr. Eric Davis, and a US Department of Defense official called Admiral Thomas Wilson. The meeting took place on the 16th of October 2002, yeah, a long time ago, in the back of Admiral Wilson's car that was parked outside the EG&G Special Projects building on the junction of Greer Drive and Paradise Road in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. Now, today, EG&G have no published address at that location. Possibly they have moved or unlisted on Google Maps. There are some structures visible on the street view but have no tags. Now, EG&G are famous for being one of the principal military industrial complex contractors at Area 51, and they run the Janet airline that transports personnel to the base from nearby McCarran International Airport. Now, the author notes that Admiral Wilson is 10 minutes late, and the car pulls up, and there's two uniformed junior naval officers and an enlisted driver. Davis gets in, must be a big car obviously, and then he talks about, basically it's not exact minutes, but it's the rough notes of what the man says. He must have been scribbling hard while Wilson was talking. Wilson comes across as a jolly man. He's got a sense of humour. A number of names are dropped in the first exchange. There's only one that I recognise, that's Leslie Kane, who's a journalist who specialises in ufology and psychical research. And Wilson then goes to talk about some meetings at the Pentagon that I have heard of before, and these were in 1997 and were organised by Dr. Stephen Greer. And present, along with the great Dr. Greer himself, was Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was an Apollo astronaut, ufologist, now passed away, and also a number of Pentagon officials, one of whose name comes up later on. Now, this is the first time I've heard anyone from the government side confirming the Greer briefings, if it's confirmed that Admiral Wilson actually said what he did. Then, amazingly, Wilson appears to corroborate the existence of Majestic 12. That's always been a bit contentious, that one. Pages 3 and 4 of the document are a facsimile of a letter to Dr. Davis, dated a few months before the Las Vegas meeting, that is the 25th of April, sent from a Lieutenant Commander Willard Miller from a home address in Bel Air Bluffs, Florida, USA. It's got a government header on its crest, a government crest on the header of the letter. I don't recognise it, but Miller is somebody who's been a keen supporter of Dr. Stephen Greer, Edgar Mitchell, and the other extra-political activists, and he was allegedly present at the 1997 briefings. This is interesting. It's always been a question mark. Did these briefings take place? Greer said they did. Mitchell said they did. Do we believe them, etc.? If this turns out to be true, then it sort of confirms it. Anyway, the letter is inviting. It's basically this guy Miller inviting Dr. Davis and somebody else called Hal, H-A-L, to a meeting to discuss UFO crash retrievals with a scientist at laboratory studying high-energy magnetic fields. Now, who's Hal? It's not the computer from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think it's probably Hal Puthoff. Now, Miller asked for assurances that his involvement will be kept confidential. In fact, to this, he's the only person who's commented so far about this issue, and he's denied the whole thing. And he asked the correspondents for money for his time, and then he makes a stunning offer. Although he himself has no need to know about the subject, he's willing to provide the names and contact details of government individuals and contractors assigned to deal with UFO crash retrievals and back-engineered alien vehicles. Now, at the end, it's funny because at the last paragraph of the letter, Miller just flips instantly to a very prosaic subject, something completely different. It's a bit evasive, I think. It's it's one of these "oh, well, I'm here" kind of things. I don't know why that is. Now, from page 5 of the transcript onwards, Admiral Wilson asks Davis, lots of questions about his background. He also says he's never opened out to ufologists before. He was not interested in money or fame. He's angry with Will Miller because Miller apparently breached a confidence by revealing information to Greer, Mitchell and Kane and the others about him personally. And this led Wilson to the notoriety he was hoping to avoid. Wilson also says that in 1997 he found evidence in the government's financial files about the involvement of a defence contractor. He refuses to name it, but he says it's one of the top ones in the US in UFO projects. Now, even though he doesn't name this contractor, perhaps the choice of location for the meeting is a clue in itself. Where did the car park? Yes. What happens is Wilson makes further inquiries. He eventually arranges a meeting with a group of people from the contractor who call themselves the Watch Committee. And the Watch Committee share a small amount of information because Wilson did not have a need to know. They call this. They have a list of people who have a need to know, and they call it their bigot list, which is strange nomenclature. And Wilson couldn't believe this because at the time he was Deputy Director for the Defence Intelligence Agency and the Intelligence Assistant to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he was one of the most important military officials in the US authorities. And they said, sorry guys, we can't tell you about this, I'm afraid. You're not cleared for this. It's classified. He says, what? This is like, there's nothing in his training and his experience that would lead him to believe this would ever happen to him. He's furious. It must have been quite a blow for him, actually. I mean, it must have been quite a shock. He must have realised he's actually been quite naive. And there was a whole world out there that he knew nothing about, even though he thought, well, he's in a position to know everything. But it turns out he knows nothing, or very little. Now, on this list, they showed him a list. Excuse me. This Watch Committee showed Wilson a list of names which have clearance, but they didn't tell him what qualifies someone to be cleared for that list. Now, this is a pure compartmentalisation because only a handful of the names on the list were people he even knew. There were no presidents, no congressmen. There were very, very few with military titles. There were no executive staff in the government. There were 400 to 800 of these people, and most of them were employees of the company or junior officers. They were the kind of people who Wilson expected to salute him, to call him sir. Yet they knew all about this, and Wilson didn't. A lot of them were like, obviously they were just employees of the contractor, and they weren't officials in government. This is a very typically incestuous corporate conspiracy, isn't it? Now, it's no secret that state actors like to avoid regulation and legal accountability by employing private contractors to do their dirty work for them. And indeed, that's a very common in, say, the NHS. I mean, when I was in the NHS, I was actually contracted out to a company called ISS Medicline at one point. I was then re-employed, but then I was seconded, even though my employment remained in the NHS. I was seconded to a company called Carillion PLC, which of course is now infamous in the news because it's collapsed. And of course, another example, of course, are the mercenaries fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. The government are boasting they've pulled the troops out from the war on terror, and they can say, look, yeah, we pulled the troops out. We've got no frontline fighting forces left in those countries. The troops have come home. We've left behind a few civilian contractors, but they don't matter. People think, oh, they're just the guys to tidy up the office and sweep the floor, aren't they? No. These are mercenaries. These are frontline. These are frontline operatives, contractors who are carrying out combat operations in those theatres. Also, they have a reputation for being very trigger happy. They've been involved in atrocities in Bosnia and places like that. So you see, this is what I'm talking about here. So this is just another example of that. Perhaps the most extreme example of that. This UFO-based unacknowledged special access program from the US military-industrial complex. I expect it's the ultimate expression of that kind of political hand-washing. So this committee told Wilson they admitted they were dealing with and analysing reverse engineering technology, not of this earth, not made by human hands. Now that is very unequivocal, isn't it? I mean, there's always been this kind of question mark over what the stuff that sometimes comes out from witness testimony. You have people like Ed Fouché and people like that who talk about this sort of thing. Is it really alien, or is it stuff from Tesla and other inventors from the 19th century that has been basically it's been postponed. It's been top shelf for a few decades. Then they start developing it. They start developing it in secret. There's even a theory that they pretend it's alien to try and deter. They tell people it's alien when it's not, just to deter interest. I don't think that holds water. I've explained why that wouldn't work, that kind of trick. But it does. There is that question mark, isn't there, about is it alien or is it Tesla? Is it Tesla stuff or something like that, or Thomas Townsend Brown and these other people? But this statement is. It says it in as many words: not of this earth, not made by human hands. So that could be used to back up what Bob Lazar has been saying. But the committee wouldn't say any more. They said, we can't tell you any more, I'm afraid, Admiral Wilson. You don't have a need to know. And you can just imagine the poor guy sitting there saying, don't you tell me I don't have a need to know. I'm the intelligence assistant to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You are a civilian contractor to the government. You do what I tell you. And they say, no, we don't. Time for you to go home now, Admiral Wilson. Go and have a warm glass of milk and go to bed. Oh God, it must have really upset him. I can really imagine it. He would have found this very humiliating, and as I said, shocking. He must have sort of gone home and thought, my God, the whole world is different to how I thought it was. Anyway, Wilson did go back. He went back to the Pentagon and he tried to launch an official dispute through the standard Department of Defense grievance procedure, but he was met with an indignant refusal. In fact, his superiors, he doesn't have many of those, but his superiors ordered him to let the matter go, and they actually threatened to ruin his career if he didn't. So Eric Davis was meeting with Admiral Wilson. This lasted an hour and 10 minutes, and then he got out the car and Wilson drove off. Of course, now Richard Dolan's done some good videos about this, which is very interesting. I mean, he's said a little bit about the origins of this. It actually came from an Australian researcher. Now, that it hasn't been officially linked to Eric Davis or Admiral Wilson. Neither of those men have said anything. The only person who's commented is Willett Miller, the supposed author of the letter, and he said, "Oh, I don't know anything about this. It must be fake." Even if it's a fake, then he should be suing people through the it's not necessarily a lawsuit for defamation, but how about the Data Protection Act? Because they put his home address on the letter. They're doxing this guy Willett Miller. But anyway, Miller just says, "Oh no, it's not. No, it's nothing to do with me." No one else has commented, but so this is so where this came from. Then this has been circulating privately among some ufologists for quite a long time, and it hasn't been leaked. Dolan's known about it for a couple of years. He got it from this guy in Australia. The Australian guy said he got it from someone else who got it from Ed Davis. So it's not been confirmed yet. But it's blunt in its language. It brings up the subject of extraterrestrials, their origins and their interest. And they use the same vocabulary we're all familiar with. They don't substitute it with their own code words. Now, I'm pretty sure that the MJ12 documents are real. It was Bill Wood, actually, I think, who convinced me, because he was talking about the typeface and everything. But a lot of the question marks that skeptics have brought up concerning Majestic can't be applied here, because the authenticity cannot be disputed. There is a paper trail leading back to this researcher, and there are named names. We're just waiting for them to say anything. There is actually a proper document. It's on paper. It's traceable. It's not the sort of thing that can be hoaxed. It's got like various things that can be analysed. I mean, the Majestic 12 documents, you must realise, were never seen. No one ever actually saw the documents. What happened was in 1988, a guy called Jamie Chandray was sent microfilms of them, basically photographic facsimiles on film. No one's ever seen the Majestic 12 documents. So this is something we need to watch. I'll be keeping you updated with anything that comes to light. I mean, it's been a couple of weeks since this hit the news. I mean, I wrote about it on Japan My Voice on the 9th of June. So we're now waiting for further information, which may well come probably from Richard Dolan. He seems to be on the case here. Hopefully there'll be other confirmation from other people as well. So wow. if this turns out to be real, God, I hope it does. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yes, we've got to go there, I'm afraid. Surely the most fateful words that exist in the lexicon of a ufologist are the words case closed. In fact, I have come to believe that whenever you even hear someone say the words case closed about anything, you just know that bastard is not going away. You think it has, then it'll pop up again, it'll bite you in months or years to come. Now, the Alien Autopsy. Now, I'm not going to fill the description box with links, as I sometimes do, as you know, but you can find the video I made about the Alien Autopsy. It was a sort of double video about Anthony Peake. I shouldn't have done it like that. I should have split it in two. But anyway, it's Alien Autopsy and Anthony Peake. Forget the Anthony Peake bit, unless you're interested in that sort of thing. It's the Alien Autopsy bit that counts. Now, the thing about the Alien Autopsy, right? It was released in 1995. It took the world by storm. It was very, very popular. Not as quite as obsessively groundbreaking and it wasn't exactly like it. Put it this way, it wasn't like it was portrayed by the film and the Ant and Dec film Alien Autopsy, where it's like everyone goes nuts. It wasn't quite like that, but it was very, very popular within the ufological community. It was met with mixed response, generally on the skeptical side. There were some lukewarm people who supported it, generally skeptical. Now, I was not into UFOs in those days. I really only started developing a serious interest in UFOs in the closing years of the 1990s. So I probably came across the Alien Autopsy, I can't remember exactly, but it would have been about 3 to 4 years after it emerged. And I don't think I ever took it seriously, ever. I mean, by then a lot of the research had been done by people like Philip Mantle, and it essentially had been discredited by him. And I read his book on the matter. From then on, I think I went from almost certain to absolutely certain that the Alien Autopsy was fake. Well, guess what? It's back. It's back. The Alien Autopsy has resurfaced. It's raised its knobbly little head, its knobbly little skinny, cut open head to try and mess with us again. Now, of course, as you know, I came across the Alien Autopsy and I was sort of interested in it. I didn't believe it. In 2006, Ray Santilli and Gary Schofield, the alleged creators of this film, made a full confession. They made a full confession that they had faked it. They explained why they did it. They explained how they did it. There was a documentary with Eamon Holmes presenting, and then there was a large. Then, of course, you can see it was perfectly timed as viral marketing for the film, of which Santilli and Schofield were executive producers. Alien Autopsy, made by Warner Brothers. You've seen it all, Ant and Dec starring. It's actually a really good film. It's very funny, and I enjoyed that film enormously. But I never thought it was real. Now, I also came across a man called Spiros Balaris, who also claimed to have been the one who created the Alien Autopsy. His story was very convincing. I talked to him. I interviewed him actually for Panmo Radio. I'm hoping to get him back on the show again when his book comes out. Although he's been writing a book for quite a long time now. But I found his story very, very persuasive, I must say. Now, of course, there were a few lone voices crying in the wilderness, and of course you're going to hear from one of them in a minute because I've got him on the show. But one of them, of course, was my good friend Colin Wilfred. And if you remember I've already done a little talk with him in my UFO Academy video that's just gone, and I've got him back on the show again. He's going to be on this program to talk again in a minute about the Alien Autopsy. But Colin was absolutely, he is convinced that it's real. He's convinced that there's been some government disinformation. It was a real video that was leaked. There's been government disinformation to try and discredit it, things like that. Now, I didn't believe Colin. I didn't. I'm now in a position where I'm going to have to reassess all this because of some new testimony that's come to light from someone called Kit Green. Now, Kit Green is a he's actually a chap from the CIA. He's actually used to be in the CIA. What's happened is a document was leaked to, well, believe it or not, it was actually Bob Bigelow and Eric Davis again. Yeah, and it's from a former. It claims that a former CIA scientist called Kit Green was briefed 3 different times during and after his tenure at the CIA on topics relevant to UFOs and the Roswell incident, alien autopsy, and they use that word. Yeah. Now this memo, again, it's been circulating for a while. It was found in the archives of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and it states that after Kit Green left the CIA, he was called to the Pentagon by a person who showed him the alien autopsy photos and reports. The photos of the alien cadaver are consistent with the object seen in the 1990 Santilli film, the Santilli Alien Autopsy film. And it's an interesting little memo here. It looks realistic. Again, we're waiting for this. It includes another name, Con Kelleher, who's he was CC'd into it. Con Kelleher is an Irish researcher who assisted Bigelow with the Skinwalker investigation and has done a very good interview actually on Coast to Coast, all about the Skinwalker Ranch. I haven't actually seen the Jeremy Corbell film. I've got to see that. Yeah. Now, Green provided in his professional evaluation of the footage. This was in 2001, a bit long before Santilli made his confession, and Santilli and Shoefield. He said the alien autopsy film is a real alien cadaver. It is real, and the corpse seen in the film and stroke video is the same as the photos Kit saw in 1987 and 88 in the Pentagon briefing, because he was briefed around the same time as Dr. Greer, Edgar Mitchell and Leslie Kane were. I don't know if there's a connection with that at all. The memo also includes an email in which Green reveals alien forensic tissues and organs being stored at the Walter Reed Armed Forces Institute for Pathology, a medical museum. Now this is interesting. This is at Bethesda, Maryland. This is the place. Oh, actually, it may not be the same place because it's actually the medical museum in Washington D.C. Sorry, but the Walter Reed Medical Center is. I don't know if it's got the name Walter Reed. It may not be the same place, but the Walter Reed Medical Center is where Admiral James Forrestal supposedly committed suicide, although I believe it wasn't a suicide. When asked why there was so much debunking of the Santilli video, Green said, "The PR folks around Santilli are indeed not operating with a full set of dishes and a little dense and not very nice to boot." All right. That's so does Greer has actually had contact with them, has he? All right. I don't know. But anyway, but of course this is all. It's all kicked off again, hasn't it? It's all kicked off. Now, people are talking about Linda Moulton Howe's done a video about it. Richard Dolan's done it. Talk about it. Grant Cameron. Linda said on her channel, she said, "These words from Dr. Green are the authenticity of the six-fingered, six-toed human dissected after the retrieval from a 1947 UFO crash." I think she meant humanoid. I don't think she actually meant human. She said it is confirmation that the Santilli film is real. It is important. Now, Philip Mantle believes differently. They call him a UFO sleuth in this article. This is from The Sun. He probed the footage for 14 years, branded it the world's largest hoax. It's not the world's largest hoax, actually, but I do agree with him, or I did agree with him on it completely. That it was fake. But Mantle believes that this memo was genuine, and indeed it has. I mean, there's been some confirmation of that, which I'll talk about in a minute. He said, "What amazes me, I am personally mentioned in this 11-page document." That's how he talks, Philip Mantle. "It just goes to show that just when you think you've seen it all, something will crop up to prove otherwise. What has sent some UFO researchers into a tailspin is the comments from Kit Green." Yes. Now, it's something that very, very few people take Colin Wilfred's position. Very few. Now, Phil says basically that Kit Green can't possibly have seen what he said he'd seen. because in this memo, the memo's dated, and he could have done. I mean, the memo's dated 2001, but it refers to something that Kit Green said in 1987, 88, or what he saw in 1987, 8, and Philip Mantle says, well, he can't possibly have seen. He said here that people are jumping on the gravy train. And he says, of course, Kit Green could not have seen an Alien Autopsy film or photograph that looked the same as the Santilli Alien Autopsy film some years before, as the Santilli film is fake and was not made or conceived until 1995 when Spiros Malaris appeared on the scene. Spiros worked the UK sculptor John Humphrys to make the film. It really is that simple. Kit Green could not have seen what he claimed to have seen in the memo. I've tried to get this point out to others, but I simply can't get around their belief system. Oh dear. But obviously, he could have, if the alien autopsy was real. That's the question in hand, I think. If it was real, if it turns out somehow this autopsy was real, or the autopsy film was real. I know, I've never hear me say that before, would you? You never thought you'd hear me say that. But if it turns out it's real, then he could have done. Because the autopsy would have been made the autopsy film would have been made many years before that.
Right, I'm joined by a chap that regular viewers will recognise. It's Colin Wilfred. He's back again. Hey, Colin.
Hello, Ben. Good to speak to you on this balmy summer's evening.
It's good to have you back on the show, and I'm actually video recording Skype for the first time, so hopefully this will work. If it doesn't, I'll just have to cut the audio and use that. But hopefully viewers should have the pleasure of seeing both our faces, with any luck.
Yeah. Well, I can always, like I said, I can always put his face in there if it's.
Yeah. So, so Colin, now. This is a subject we've delved into many times, and we're going to bring it. I never thought I'd say today, but I'm going to have to. It's almost like the word "case closed" is sort of like the most fateful words of all, aren't they? Because when can you ever say that? Because everything that's ever been said about every time that phrase is used, it's almost a trigger for it to come up again in about 5 years' time.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, obviously, I've got my own thoughts and always have had my own thoughts on this subject.
Yeah,
but,
this is you should point out that we're talking, of course, about the legendary, the one and only Alien Autopsy film.
Yeah, the one and only.
Now you've been kind of a lone, lone voice crying in the wilderness, haven't you? Because a lot of research went into this. When it first appeared, was it 1995? It first appeared.
Yeah, so it was the 1995. I mean, I don't think, supposedly by Santilli got this footage back from Cleveland, Ohio in 1992. And he was, depending on what version of events you believe, he marketed this piece of footage that allegedly came from a military cameraman, and it showed not just an autopsy, there was, 2 autopsies, there was some debris footage, allegedly maybe even some other footage as well. But I think the main thing that we're all aware of is the famous piece of footage that you're talking about, which was the one that was shown on national TV in most countries around the world on the 28th of August 1995.
This was something that we did do. I mean, you and I both did on Panmo Radio. We did a radio show, didn't we, about that to mark the 20th anniversary of it. I remember.
Yeah, I think we did that. Yeah, so that was
2015. Yeah, it was 2015.
Sounds about right.
And I thought it had all gone away. I know you stuck by your guns in your position on it, and I always disagreed with you. I like people. I mean, I don't have a problem with people disagreeing. I think it's good. I mean, and I'd be a very lonely guy if I did, actually.
No, I respect people for doing. I'm not forcing anyone to. I mean, I'm not suddenly saying that I'm right all of a sudden just because this stories come out. But as I've always said, it's something that there's just too much to the story to say it's just a blatant, obvious hoax, because we wouldn't still be arguing about it. Some nearly 25 years will be the end. Well, it will be 2020 will be the 25th anniversary. So I mean, that's kind of crazy. know of anything. You know, it's been going on for such a long time now, but yeah, with these recent events, it has sort of indicated some, at least. I mean, it's not a new thing. These people coming forward, because I mean, to be fair, there's been many people who have come forward before and claimed that this piece of footage, they've been shown it in secure places like Langley and things like that, military people, obviously, or intelligence agency type people. So this isn't actually new in terms of people on the record who's actually saying they've seen it. I think even Philip Mantel's book, you know, he lists about 5 people who have that sort of military type background as having seen it previously. So I guess it's just because it's sort of come back to haunt, you know, after this hoax story came out in 2006, because there wasn't, for a long time, the Alien Autopsy was just gathering, you know, it wasn't totally clear who was behind it, or if it was a hoax or if it was real, because we were left dangling for about 11 years, from 95 to 2006. And I can see why people always thought that Ray was some sort of charlatan or whatever, because he could never authenticate you know, the footage, although, you know, there is claims that he did authenticate it in 1990 and in 1947 with Bob Shell in the early days. There's this controversial piece of footage that's out there that shows the entry into the autopsy room. But I think obviously most people who had the problem was that, you know, where are the canisters? Why can't we see the image on the actual film itself? And why can't that be analysed? And okay, it's a very impressive piece of footage, but why can't we have, you know, an actual piece with the image of the alien on and say, well, you know.
I must say, Colin, like I really only got into ufology a couple of years after this had all flared up, and I didn't really pay much attention when it came out in 1995. I read Philip Mantel's book like you did, and I did find it convincing. I also spoke to the magician. We all know who that is. I spoke to him and I interviewed him, and yeah, I did believe him. Now, but I'm always willing to admit that I'm wrong. And what we're getting in here, something has come to light just in the last couple of weeks that which could reopen the case, isn't it? I mean, who is actually? What is the name of the person who's just?
So this is Kit Green, who's he's quite a high. I mean, he's definitely worked for the CIA, and you know, I know Richard Dolan talked about. He was a science advisor, briefed President Reagan at times on certain science issues. He does seem to be involved with a lot of these people, like Hal Pitoff and
it was Kit. What's the name?
Kit Green.
Kit Green. Now,
yeah,
that's not a name I've heard before. Who is Kit Green, actually? I mean, you say he's connected to Pitoff and these other guys on TTSA.
Well, he's been around quite a while. I mean, he certainly seems to be involved in the UFO subject for a long time. And I mean, because these aren't spring chickens. These people, I think they're in either their late 70s or they might even be pushing their 80s. I mean, I've just been, funny enough, just reading a bit about Hal Pitoff in Ingo Swann's. I've been reading Ingo Swann's book about the moon and how he did some remote viewing on the moon in a book called Penetration, which is interesting. But going back to Kit Green, he seems to have been around these circles, and I think he's been like a consultant to the ufology subject by people who are forever sort of being linked to this subject, like Bigelow, and then you've got these other sort of, I don't know, Ray Pandolfi. There's all these people, but I know that Grant Cameron talked about the Avery. You know, this claim is that there's all these sort of agents that are, or people quite high up, that they're dealing with the UFO subject, and they've been assigned these sort of bird name aliases and things like that. But I think he's definitely seen as someone who would be in a high position to know such things. And I mean, the actual document itself is that some emails going back and forth with some other people, and it's like a tight-knit group. I mean, I think these emails may have been leaked from Edgar Mitchell, is it? It's not totally clear who's actually leaked these, but it's been basically he was briefed about 3 times on the UFO or Alien Autopsy, actually, because in the emails it refers to, I think there was a briefing in, I have to remember, I think one might have been the early 80s, one might have been.
Yeah, there's one where he says he's ex-CIA, he's asked to authenticate whether it was real, and the Pentagon showed him photographs of the same event. He says the photographs he was seeing matches the footage shown in the Santilli film. Now, obviously, he didn't have a look at the two things together, but he says he looks at the Santilli film and he said that he saw basically photographs based on that, and he says the remains are located at the Walter Reed Armed Forces Institute for Pathology. That's at the famous big white building at Bethesda, Maryland, USA, where what's his name, Forrestal, committed suicide supposedly.
Okay, I didn't know that.
But this is
like interesting.
I mean, this is a strange thing to say. It's like, because what do you believe? Do you believe that the people who came forward, like, I mean, obviously we have reports from Santilli, which they confess, then the magician confess. Philip Mantle, his book describes this other guy, Moose. This guy, what's his name?
Yeah,
Moose Carlson.
As being
he's the cameraman.
Yeah, it's apparently some bum, old actor they picked up in LA off the streets and dressed him up, put a false nose and beard or something on him, and allegedly had him recite some questions that Rob Kiviat replied for the guy behind the fact or fiction Alien Autopsy TV documentary that was on Fox. This happened, I think maybe the actual interview with happened maybe about late 95 or 96. But yeah, there's been this confession thing, like you say. I mean, it was always very suspicious. It's actually one of the things that really, in some ways, drew attention to it all. Because sometimes, if there is a cover-up, and I'm saying that I think there is, but they like closure on subjects, and I think it was such a shock. I mean, personally, again, I do believe that this footage is real, and that it caused such a shock at the time. And Ray was quite advanced in his obviously development of many of the reels onto video format, and they'd been doing this for a good couple of months, so they were working their way through these various images, and obviously now the story came. I mean, this was nothing. It was all left hanging in the air. So I guess in some ways, if it was a cover-up, then I could see why 11 years later they came out with this Eamon Holmes TV documentary that sort of implied that it was a recreation, as Ray says, or at least there was a certain amount of images. I know it keeps changing. Ray, I think, just did a recent interview where he's saying like there's over a minute of footage. Or first of all, I'm sure on the documentary they said there was only a few seconds of images, so that seems to have changed. So I mean, either way, it doesn't really matter for me, because I've always thought that was just a load of nonsense. And
yeah, I mean,
part of the cover story that something happened basically, and
would it be fair to say,
like a false confession, basically?
This is your point is, I think your point you've made is that the story behind this, the story that came out, Santilli and Shoefield, confession, the other people who've confessed, this was essentially disinformation to discredit what you believe is a real piece of footage.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Sorry. Exactly. I think it's made to discredit it, but I think it was a two-layered deception. I have to say that the first layer, which happened in 2006, was the documentary and Ant and Dec motion picture film by Warner Brothers. So they came out in the same week. So one was a documentary where you had Ray, you had Gary, you had John Humphrys supposedly as the dummy, the alien maker, and you had Gareth Watson as supposedly the guy behind the viewing window, and a couple of other characters, like this Trevor Chelsea guy who claims to be, working at the butcher's meat market, and giving John these off cuts and things. And then a year later, and then obviously that was quite hard to swallow. And if you watch, it's actually quite I think it's quite revealing, that documentary itself, because it's portraying Ray as a bit of a shyster basically, but he's a bit of a wired boy, and he's
well, he is. I mean,
telling the truth.
Yeah, he comes across that way.
Yeah, and he looks like smarmy. He looks like he's giggling, and I think this is something that they've actually told him to portray as sort of, I think there's a bit where he says, towards the end, and long may it continue, about, whether there's going to be more footage, and, it's like this cheesy grin, and everyone's thinking, you really got us, you made us, you've made millions out of this, and you've just basically pretty much admitted that you hoaxed it all, because not many people, I'm not actually aware of anyone who seriously takes credence for the idea that he's actually put a few images into this film and built a whole 18-minute film around it.
See, this is what he claims. He claims he concocted the whole thing with John Humphrys, the sculptor. He made a dummy, and he used the meat, the various pieces of meat we used for the props. They did it all in a flat in London, and we've been to see the flat. I think maybe I'll put a link in the description box of the videos we've made before. And we also we went to see the magician, and he did a live show talking about this, didn't he? And I do like, there's a video of that as well. We did a video about that too, didn't we?
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. I think it was something like September, I'm thinking 2017 or something like that.
So I mean, if this is real, I mean, how did it come out? If Santilli didn't leak it, I mean, Santilli was the guy who basically published it. He said he got it from the secret source inside the government. Is that true? And then he changed his position and said, now obviously, like, he had an incentive because the Ant and Dec movie was coming out. This is the Warner Brothers fictionalized drama, fictionalization of what happened. I must admit, I enjoyed that film. It's very fun.
Yeah, and it's entertaining, and I was hoping to actually show that at a conference in America this year, but hopefully be able to show that to American audiences.
Yeah, I did think it was funny. I know.
It's
screwing, but I mean, the thing is, if that's the case, I mean, at some point they made the decision. I mean, obviously this would have been before Philip Mantle even got hold of it, and because he, of course, he immediately got on the case, and he claims to have basically exposed Santilli and Shoefield. I mean, did at some point was the position made? Oh, we're going to have a cover up here, and they're going to fool everyone. Even Philip Mantle was fooled. Is that the case?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm saying that what happened there was once they knew that they had a problem, the authorities, which would have been, and I sort of can nail this down to a sort of time period, which, because of this other autopsy footage that not many people always seem to forget about, which is suddenly disappeared off the face of the earth, which was shown to a number of researchers, Colin Andrews, Maurizio Baiata, Philip Mantle and his wife, and maybe one or two, Reg Presley. And this was shown around April '95, and it seems that not long after that, I think the claim is that video went to Volker Spielberg, who supposedly financed the film, if you believe that that he did put up the money because the cameraman needed. Basically, the reason he sold it to Ray was because he needed the money to finance his daughter's wedding. But what I'm saying is that there was because there was a number of break-ins at his properties, cars, and stuff like that. So I feel like special forces, or once they realised that there was some issue there, that I don't think they would rather explain to Ray why they want this film back. I think they're more likely they would break in and just take it with force, and leave Ray sort of having to explain why he hasn't no longer got the footage. But well, that would be too obvious to suddenly. We're never going to have Ray say, "Well, honest gov, suddenly I've lost all the film, someone's stolen it." That would not ride with most people. Being honest, that means for you had this great piece of footage, and you're telling me that someone stole it off you now. So that was never going to happen as a cover story, if, as I believe, that the authorities interceded and removed this footage, possibly footage of Truman on it as well.
I suppose they would do that. I mean, I suppose that you would, in their position, you would. So, yeah, it seems Santilli, when he came forward, of course, he's supposing, like, you're correct. And I mean, I'm actually of the opinion now that possibly you are, and I mean, I know this based on things that have come out more recently, and I know I've always disagreed with you, but it's possible I might have to eat humble pie on this, because you know, the fact that Santilli actually, as soon as he got, supposing he just got hold of these reels of footage from a government insider, if I got hold of these reels of footage, the first thing I'd do is publish them. I just put them out there. I'd say, look here's the reels.
Yeah.
Here's the video. We got an alien here. That's what I would do as a ufologist. Santilli's not a ufologist, and I suppose the first thing he thought of was how can I develop this commercially?
Yeah, exactly.
He planned to make it in. Yeah.
I mean, the original thing was, the ironic thing was, it was never supposed to come out on like a massive, great big show on TV and all this worldwide attention. It was purely something he was going to market himself onto VHS at the time, and then I think it's more down to what Reg Presley suddenly, you know, because he was on this Anne and Nick TV show in early January, and even before that, I think there's some footage. We were actually talking about this before 95 began. I think there's footage in 94 where he sort of alludes to it as well, I found. And
he mentions it in his book. He's got this book called Wild Things Don't Tell. It's quite a rare book.
Yeah, it's a very interesting book, and I recommend people, because it's actually, he was quite close to Ray, and there's actually a story in there that no one ever wants to, and certainly people like Philip Mantle were not aware of, and it's just sad that Reg is now no longer alive to talk about, to expand on some of the things he said in that chapter in the book, because it's very, very interesting about him being visited by these two agent, or like somebody was being pestered by people who claimed to be from a military intelligence group, basically, to view the footage. And so I think Ray relented, and one of these officers came round and viewed it, and you know, looked at it very sternly, and then sort of said, I've got to bring my senior officer back with me later. And when that senior officer returned and they watched it again, you know, they were sort of poo-pooing it, saying, oh, you know, we get these footage every day, and it's, you know, it's sort of making a bit of a joke of it. But
well, these nowadays, of course, there's if you put in Alien Autopsy into YouTube, there's hundreds of pieces of footage, hundreds, and of course most of them are fake. There's a couple I think are real, and I've said which ones I think are real. The ones which come out of Russia may well be real, especially the older one.
Little midget type one, yeah.
Yeah, but obviously there's loads of fake ones nowadays, and we've got a terrible signal to noise ratio problem. But in 1995 it was a different situation, and yeah, I mean, I think how this could be resolved, I don't know, because someone like an ex-CIA guy, I suppose you've got to take what he says seriously. I mean, it's maybe another piece of disinformation, but why would they do this, Colin? I mean, what I don't understand is, I know there's a lot of people out there who are going to be saying Kit Green is just disinformation, but why would they use this old video, which no one used to believe anyway, as disinformation? It doesn't make sense. No. I mean, this is why I think we should take what he says seriously, and maybe ask some questions.
You have to remember, the emails were 2001, and there was, like I say, the subject was still up in the air. There was still no closure on it. People had sort of, ufologists had gone quiet on it because, you know, there hadn't been too much of a follow-up since it was aired, even though it had gone around the world. You know, this was seen by supposedly over 1 billion people or so. But it all went a bit cold, I guess, in the years that followed, because of the lack of verification of the actual footage date itself. And it was just a very, I mean, I still watch it nearly on a daily basis. Just it never causes endless fascination.
I mean, I do see it's fascinating. I mean, if I had been into UFOs in those days, I had a passing interest. Because
I was, you know, I've been studying the subject since very early 1990s. So, you know, I was subscribing to UFO magazine and all that stuff. And so as soon as I saw, I mean, you called me gullible or naive, whatever, but I got my £33 out, and I mean, back in those days, that's quite a lot of money for VHS. I mean, VHS videos were maybe, I don't know, £10 or something like that. And you know, even the big blockbusters that come out, 10 to 15, and this was being marketed as £33.
Yeah, so, Santilli obviously thought he was a businessman. He thought this is an opportunity. It's a lucrative opportunity, and of course, the first thing that supposing you're right, and supposing this is real, the first thing the government are going to do is, we've got a guy here. He's publishing our tapes. He's publishing this film that's gone missing. We got to get the film back, and then we got to discredit him. It's too late to suppress it. We have to discredit him.
I think it was such a hot potato. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, we don't know. I still am not quite exactly sure how many people are involved in his team transferring it. I mean, we know this person, Chris Carey. It's people who've never really gone officially on record, and that's another thing. None of these people want to talk. You know, Chris Carey. You know, he was sort of in charge of the distribution, I believe, of the videos. I mean, I think he lives in America now, but there must have been at least, I would say, at least must have been 24 people involved in some aspects. I mean, this must have been quite a big deal. Although, you know, he had quite a small little office apparently in Marylebone. So he didn't obviously have like a huge group of people to work with. But it's just interesting that it seems almost like all these people have been silenced to not talk about it. I mean, even Volker Spielberg put the money up. I mean, I think French TV tracked him down, and he was very angry, and he said he just wanted to be left alone, which is a strange reaction from someone who's helped finance, you know, one of the most amazing pieces of film footage ever. So you have to really question these people and why there was such a silence of and continues to be. I mean, you know,
are they all silent? I mean, has there ever been an interview with Spielberg? Has that ever happened?
No, not on camera. No,
because he's usually quite a quiet person.
Yeah, he's on Facebook. I sent message to the other people involved. Even, I mean, what's frustrating is also the ones who are supposedly hoaxed here. I mean, apart from the magician guy. I mean, none of the other
he's
ones,
very vocal. I mean, the magician is very vocal.
It seems like he's a sort of, I mean, a gatekeeper type, controlling the. I mean, what I say is that he's the only one who's been briefed of all the details. He's got all the books, the knowledge of what supposedly did happen and the version of events. But it's
he said so in his live show. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're too scared for.
And I've watched your debates with him. They get quite fiery at times.
Well, I know. I mean, it's sort of more fiery online. I mean, the one I did with Chris and Philip. I mean, that was quite restrained, really. But yeah, I mean, it's quite sort of nasty sort of stuff, really. But I think there's a lot at stake here. So
and obviously what's interesting is you were on Project Camelot. You've been on twice now, haven't you? First time you were on there, you got cut off, strangely enough.
Yeah, and I'm still
in very mysterious circumstances.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying I've got the greatest laptop or anything, but it was kind of weird how I know we had audio issues, and I'm still looking to do part 2 of that.
It was an untraceable. Apparently, according to Kerry and Neil, it was an untraceable problem. So it wasn't the usual. You know, you always track the usual.
Back on air, and I know she recorded the audio. So, I mean, I've had some strange things happen since then. I mean, I've been getting, you know, I got a threat sort of text message sent, and people can laugh that off, think, oh, that's just someone, you know, or you're sending it to yourself, or you know, all this sort of stuff. But you know, the fact is, like what I said, a threatening text message. I've had phone calls which are, you know, no caller ID. I've had message. I had one just a couple of days ago where I had 3 missed calls in the space of about 7 minutes, and some bizarre sort of message left on the phone, which was someone speaking backwards. So
that's very odd.
Really make it up. I mean, I'm not saying that this is, you know, giving me more credibility, but it is kind of strange that, you know, there's nothing to it. Why is all of a sudden on my sort of, seems like someone's turning the heat on a bit, you know, they're sort of threatening for me to sort of stop talking to people, and I'll be talking to Linda Moe and Howe and next month. So
good.
making things going on there, and you know, other stuff. So
because she did a show.
Someone seems to be getting a bit worked up about it. That's all I'm saying.
Linda Moulton Howe did an interesting show, and it was from her I first found out about this, because she actually was suspicious of this. I mean, she mentioned this guy Kit Green coming forward, and how she's really made some good points. Some of the ones that I've made and tonight, which is, why is this suddenly, if this is fake, why is it suddenly coming up again? And I must admit that is a question that needs to be answered.
Yeah.
If it's disinformation, it doesn't really. I mean, disinformation happens, but usually it has some purpose. This would be disinformation without a purpose.
It's
You see what
yeah. I
I
mean,
mean?
there's no
So
real.
I wonder why it's suddenly coming up now. And
I think I don't know. I mean, this I have to remember when I did that Kerry interview. I think it was the end of May. So this literally dropped. I think the 4th of June or so. At least this email did with Kit Green. And so whether someone, I'm not saying, but might have been aware of my work or watched that video, or there is a pro group, because I don't think all these sides are actually working together. I do feel that there may be some pro-disclosure groups in, the government, or the pro-disclosure groups who have the power to bring this information out, and maybe I think they're battling the people behind a cover-up. So I think there could be other agendas between competing groups here, and a bit like when you hear, if you believe the MJ12 documents, how that was placed in 1984 with James Chandray, was it?
yeah, I mean, Chandray was sent. He sent microfilms basically of shots of a document, which I mean, that's another thing that's been very controversial. I mean, more people believe in the MJ12 documents than believe in the Alien Autopsy.
But I think that was something that was placed there and sort of ignited debate. So maybe the whole thing is for people to question again, maybe because it's not just, Kit Green, as I say. There's a number of, like Mike Maloney, the famous mirror photographer, I think he's got an MBE. He claims he saw this footage at Disney through meeting some Disney animators in 1978, albeit the same creature, the same type room, but he claimed that there was one that was still alive. I mean, shockingly enough, on the floor. I mean, he tells this story. I mean, I've reached out to Mike Maloney, and hopefully Grant can get an interview of him. But there does seem to be a silence, as if some, people don't want to stir up the hornet's nest here. That it's still very much a hot potato amongst, even after all these years, almost 25 years. It's still like people are.
Well, I think it is now. I mean, I think it certainly is. I know it has been between you and the magician and several other people. And Philip Mantle, I've seen your debates with them. But most people seem to have forgotten about this, to be honest. I must admit. And the fact that it is a hot potato now. It's suddenly become a hot potato again. Someone's warmed it up in the microwave. And I think to myself, well, there's only two possibilities. Either it's fake and the hoax is being regurgitated, in which case, why? It serves no political purpose, and it serves. I don't see why someone would make that up. Or there is something real behind it, and you'll be vindicated, which will be quite something, because you have been a bit of a maverick in this field, because being one of the few people who actually do maintain that it's a real piece of footage.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a lonely road, but I'm not. I mean, that's the bit. As far as my Facebook group goes, I mean, I'm not. Michael Hesselman, the original German researcher, he's not really involved in ufology, but I know he's taken a keen interest with it all, and he did the original Beyond Roswell book, which deals with the alien autopsy. And I've met up with a number of researchers since the group formed. Even a great guy called Ed Gurman, who claims that they found the crash site because the actual cameraman gave the details to Ray, and he found this crash site in Noble Canyon, and this was an event that's supposed to have happened on the 31st of May 1947, and it's not actually to do with Roswell at all, but because it was marketed as such, it was it's a bit confusing. So there's lots of controversial why at that time. I mean, that was the most famous UFO crash we knew about, generally speaking. Maybe Aztec sort of debunked, but certainly Roswell.
I'm not so sure about Aztec actually, because there's
well, I believe Aztec's real.
I think Aztec is real. Yeah, I mean,
I think it's real as well.
There's some forensic. There's actually some physical evidence at the scene, which leads me to believe it was real. But I mean, this thing, obviously, supposing this alien was real, I mean, it could be one of many bodies from crash retrievals, because contrary to what many people think, Roswell is not the only event of its kind. In fact, it's one of many events that's happened both before and since Roswell. Judging by the props, I mean, it's been dated to the late 1940s. But Colin, it could be from almost anywhere. It could be from numerous different crash retrievals. Excuse me. If it's real, that's it could. So How do you think this is going to be resolved? Because what's the next? Now we have this new information. The case essentially has been reopened now. Where do you think we go from here? What do you think we can do to prove?
Well, I think
disprove this case.
Well, I mean, I still think Ray's compromised, Gary's compromised, that they are maintaining this recreation story to. I always say that the original footage is the most important footage, and that includes the debris footage, and also the mysterious disappearance of this other 12-minute autopsy, which was far more graphic.
Yeah, there were two. There was a
so that's
one,
really interesting.
And you showed a still of it. I remember dreaming.
Yeah, there's a few stills. I mean, it's also got similar sort of type procedures and the eye removal lens, more graphic below between the legs of the being. Obviously, I haven't seen the whole footage, so I've only seen these stills. Can only go by on what Maurizio said, but I mean, it makes no real sense why this footage can't be verified, because the magician has always said that they did an incorrect medical procedure, and that's why they had to sort of redo it all again, basically, because they just purely because of some incorrect medical procedure. It never made sense to me. And
that'd be a huge amount of money. I mean, you have to build another dummy,
and then
those dummies are expensive. I mean, John Humphrys is obviously he was hired by Warner. Ironically, he was hired by Warner Brothers to make the dummy for the Ant and Dec movie. So he had the same sculptor apparently who allegedly made the Santilli film dummy. But I mean, it's not exactly as if Santilli would have had insurance for something like that, which means. Was he able to go out and say, John, could you make us another dummy? Here's the 150 grand or whatever you need.
The magician claims that he then financed the next one. That's what his claim is. But I'm not really buying any of that. I mean, even if this footage, I mean, I suppose the question is, because they've said that Ray says that, there's a couple of frames or something that's from the original. But is he also saying there's a couple of frames from the original also in this other autopsy? Is he also saying that there's a couple of real frames in the debris footage as well? I mean, the trouble is, it just makes Ray's story look like he's blagging it, basically, and I think that's the impression that they want people to have. They want to take, and that's why I think there will not be nothing that will taken home from this. This recent interview he's done with Michael and the lawyer for Grant Cameron. I
mean, the first thing I would ask, Colin. I mean, one of the first questions any investigator would ask was, okay, we've got you're producing these commercial VHSs, but could we please see the original footage? Because if it's shot on 1940s film stock with the US Army on the sticker, then that would be very, very important piece of evidence, and Ray could present that. So either he never had the reel in the first place, and he did concoct the film, or there was a reel that was stolen.
Yeah,
it was stolen back or redeemed by the government, taken back by the government, which either is a possibility now. I mean, I used to go with the former, but now I'm looking at the latter as well.
I think that the intention is because even when that Leicester Square thing happened, Ray came out with this new photo of, excuse me,
bless you.
Yeah, which looked very similar to something from the original footage, but not quite the same. So they do seem to want to imply that footage is bogus, basically, and that Ray's deal does have a couple of images of the actual real one. But for me, that's a complete cover story. The real footage is exactly what you see, and as is the debris footage, and is the other autopsy. And there's no reason why this other autopsy shouldn't be shown, because if Ray says it's a recreation, it's not as if he's already said it's a recreation, so there would be no harm suddenly showing this piece of footage, and it doesn't add up. There's so much stuff it doesn't add up. I mean, I've got 2 hours to talk about it, and there's so many weird things that are just, you'd have to sort of say that there's some smoke there, even if you think it is a hoax, whatever. You'd have to agree with me that there's some very highly strange things that just simply do not add up about this story, and it demands a greater light shone in it. And
well, I certainly am now reassessing this whole thing, Colin. I mean, I used to be very sure about what the answer was, and now I'm not so sure.
That's good to know, because I think that those emails have served the purpose that people just when there's always going to. I mean, I'm hopeful of something coming forward, but someone might just suddenly, for whatever reason, come forward with new information, or someone who's involved in the cover-up that doesn't want to be part of it. And obviously, we're dealing with a really controversial subject here, which is the existence of a footage of a crashed spacecraft in the late 40s, which would pretty much prove the whole reality of UFOs and aliens, and no doubt the back engineering as well. So there's a lot at stake here. So I can see why people are scared. I can see why people are worried. I can see why people risk to lose everything. But you can't stop the sun. As I said on my page, you can't stop the sun coming up. It's ridiculous. So
well, the truth has a habit of doing the same. It's when it's I mean, this is why I hope. I mean, hopefully the impasse will be broken by more information, new information that's coming out. So far, 2019 is proving to be the kind of year where we're on. It seems like we're on a roll of new information coming out, which some of it's real, some of it may not be. I don't know. I'll discuss that elsewhere in this video. But Colin, thanks very much for coming on again on the show. Much appreciated. What I'll do is I'll put links in the description box to the videos Colin and I have made before about this subject. So you can look at our previous contributions, because Colin and I have talked about this several times now. So fingers crossed, Colin, it'll all come out in the wash. So
let's hope so. Let's hope there's some more light shown there, and we get. I mean, I know there was a few articles in the paper, I think today and yesterday, so that's good on that level as well. So that'll make people think again, at least, that but it isn't just a hoax that certain people like to imply that it is.
Okay, well, thanks very much, mate. Cheers.
Thanks, Ben. Well, I look forward to seeing you next time, and thanks for having me on your show.
And I will return to the Alien Autopsy later on in this film. But the Alien Autopsy resurfacing is not the only controversy in this particular period of time. There's a lot more I'm going to cover, and this is one of them. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I'm going to give you the basics. You can find out about it in this article here by Michael Salla on exopolitics.org, which is his website. An argument has broken out between Michael Salla and Dr. Stephen Greer, and it's something that's quite predictable, actually. I'm definitely taking Michael Salla's side in this because, well, personally, I much prefer him. I think he's a much better guy than Greer is. And also, Greer has made a mistake again, and well, he doesn't like it when people call him out on his mistakes. And it's happened before. In fact, this is the same error he made, which Kerry Cassidy called him out on years ago. I've already covered the situation of their argument between the two guys. Greer has come out with this notion again to do with all ETs are all nice, and he actually wrote a paper called When Disclosure Serves Secrecy. And he's basically claiming that disclosure would serve the secret agenda, and he's even said in certain circumstances, he said, I'd rather have the secrecy continue, frankly. He's referring basically to the situation where the ATIP situation and TTSA, referring to the UFOs as a threat. Use the word threat. Now, he says here, this is Greer talking, a disclosure that would be truthful would be forward-looking, and that would have an interplanetary peace initiative and communication and contact initiative, and that would have the release of these technologies for peaceful energy generation, transportation, what have you. Now, he's basically saying that when you refer them to us, you're essentially saying if you refer to aliens as threats, then you're just going to make things worse. You're going to possibly start an interplanetary war and all these other sorts of things. And the truth of the matter is, it's not like what he's saying. Greer is misrepresenting this whole thing. Now, as I'll come on in a minute and I'll explain a little bit more about the the Unidentified series, which I haven't seen yet, but I'll come on to that again in a minute. However, the word threat is, in the military parlance, doesn't necessarily mean something that's going to attack you. You need to shoot. It means something that might. It's a threat is calculated by capability plus professed intent. Now, what we have at the moment is a capability. There's no doubt about it, but no professed intents. So what is being said, and I must stress, I've not watched this series yet, but no one is saying we should go out and start shooting the aliens. No one is saying we shouldn't have peace initiatives and contact. And Salla calls him out on it, and Greer goes berserk, like Greer does. Greer tends to respond this way when people criticise him, and it's pretty obvious why that is. I've talked before about Dr. Stephen Greer and the problems I have with him. I'm not totally anti-Greer. I'm not saying he's worthless and you should just ignore him and have nothing to do with him. I'm saying he makes errors, and because of certain elements of his personality, he doesn't like it when people point those errors out to him or people disagree with him on something. So these are his personality problems that he needs to deal with, and Michael Salla has done nothing wrong. He's absolutely correct, as was Kerry Cassidy, in calling him out on this and pointing out the fact that extraterrestrials come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's a whole taxonomy of different species, and they're not all sweetness and light as Greer sees them as then as Greer portrays them as. There are some different ones. I mean, the ETs exhibit a wide range of behaviours. They really do seem to have a massive amount of different motives and agendas. They some of them are gorgeous and loving the way Greer says them are. I mean, they're a minority. They're also a minority, though, are highly malevolent. They do injuries to people. They do non-consensual surgical procedures on them, as Salla would term it, and they do a lot of harm to people's lives. And there's even a number of people who've died as a result of their interaction with ETs. The majority of ETs, luckily, seem to be pretty harmless. If anything, they're neutrally observing us. That's what the majority seem to be. But Greer is misrepresenting the situation badly, and Salla has explained to him why he's misrepresenting it, and Greer don't like it. Greer doesn't like it. He's stamping his little feet, and he's flexing his big muscles, and he's, oh, you know what it's like. I don't want to go into details on this. You can read up on it for yourself. But this seems to be a sign of the times. You're getting more and more of situations like this, and indeed, I'm going to have to bring up a couple more before the end of this video. Now, this is Jordan Sather. He's research. He's quite new on the scene, actually, but he has a good website called Destroying the Illusion, and it's a YouTube channel, and he has other things on it. So it's similar to Herpanwo in that respect. Now, he did a talk at Contact in the Desert. Now, Contact in the Desert you've probably heard of. It's one of the big American UFO spiritual conferences. David Wilcock's always there, and it looks good, actually. I've really always wanted to go there. I know Steve Mera, my good friend, he spoke there. I've wanted to it's one of the ones I've always wanted to see. I've always said I'll go to one of these big American conferences one day, and I thought Contact in the Desert might be one of them. Of course, if they invite me to speak, they can, and of course I get to go for nothing, so nudge nudge wink wink. However, I've got a feeling I will not be welcome at all of these conferences, and indeed it seems that Jordan wasn't. Jordan Sather spoke at the last Contact in the Desert, and some strange things started to happen. He had to make some emergency videos afterwards. Now, he did a video, he did a lecture, and it was in one of the various auditoriums, and a lot of people came along and they liked it. And of course, once the lectures are finished, the speakers then get official videos made of each lecture. Every lecture has an official video made, which Contact in the Desert produce. And Jordan was saying, great, well, so I'm looking forward to mine, you know. So because this often happens at all conferences, of course, they get recordings. And the management at CITD was saying, "Oh, we're having a few problems, Jordan. Just a few technical problems." He said, "Okay," because his video was coming out after everyone else's, and he kept asking the questions, and they kept giving him different answers about why his particular video was not being released, or had been delayed. And they said he dropped a few swear words in, which they had to edit out because they didn't want swear words. And Jordan said, "Hang on a minute. I didn't swear on stage. I'm very professional. I don't swear on stage, you know. It's not that sort of conference, so I didn't swear." So it all got a bit strange. It all went a bit weird. Now, in the end, he just couldn't get hold of recordings of his event, and he made a video explaining this and criticising Contact in the Desert for all this. Now, obviously, I don't think Contact in the Desert have made an official comment on this, so I don't know what their side of the story is. But luckily, someone in the audience made a bootleg copy of Jordan's talk, and it's the audio's not as good as it would have been otherwise, but he's perfectly audible. And And this person contacted Jordan and gave him the audio, and then Jordan then simply added the audio to his slideshow and put it up on YouTube, and there you have his presentation. But it's a good job that person was doing bootleg audios. Don't I was going to say to people, if anyone wants to make bootleg audios of my talks, go ahead. They can be very useful at certain times. But the reason it turns out what Jordan thinks happened, and he's probably right, as I said, we haven't heard CITT's position on it, but he's probably right about this, because he mentioned things that are considered politically incorrect. He brought up the subject of QAnon, Trump, and the fact that, as I've said several times, that Trump could well be the disclosure president, and that some of the things QAnon has said about this and related to the deep state and things like that are actually relevant to the exopolitical situation. I think that's what happened to him. I believe that it's quite likely that an act of censorship was committed against this man because of that. And I like this chap. I mean, his videos are really good. I've watched some of his other videos. They're really, really good. I don't know how old he is, but you can see he's quite young. And, you know, how not many people of his sort of social group probably will be respecting him for this. So he's part of a community now of mostly people older than himself who ought to be sort of at least listening to what he has to say. And if you're at a conference and someone's speaking and you make recordings for those people, you have to publish the recordings. You can't just say, well, I don't like what this person's saying, so I'm not going to publish their recording. If I did that at Dreaming Sources, I'd be very, very ashamed of myself. And in fact, I did have speakers at the last Dreaming Sources conference whom I didn't agree with. But I still published their talks. Now, seeing as I actually share a lot of Jordan's views when it comes to Trump and disclosure, maybe this explains some of the hostility that I've received over the last couple of years. I don't know. Right, now a little something that will hopefully make you laugh and might make you cringe a little bit. It's Storm Area 51. Now this is a meme that's been circulating over the last few days. It's called Storm Area 51. They can't stop all of us, or hashtag Storm Area 51. As you can see, I've contributed to it here. Over 500,000 people have signed up at the last count. Now, of course, Area 51, highly secretive military base in Nevada, USA, used for the government's most highly classified aviation projects and similar things. Until the mid-1990s, the authorities would not even acknowledge its existence. It was only formally confirmed in 2013. The CIA spy planes were developed at Area 51, and it is also a repository for foreign technology so that the government can study it in private. Now, some of the technology there is reputed to be very foreign indeed. Debris from flying saucer crashes. There's no proof of that specifically, but it's the kind of place the government would keep such artifacts, should they be found. If these wrecks, these shipwrecks from the sky, were real, it's the kind of place the government would use. You could theoretically anticipate that. It's not the only one of these theorized locations, actually, but it is the most famous, and it's symbolic. Now, occasionally trespassers try to breach the boundaries of the base, but they're always quickly arrested by the security guards, who are known as camo dudes. Now, these are men who are armed and authorized to use deadly force, so I do not recommend any such incursions. However, the meme creators hope to amass so many people that they will simply overwhelm the perimeter defense forces by sheer weight of numbers. The hope is that they can then break into the base and see them they're aliens. And as you can see, yes, I have signed up for it. Okay, but not because I really see it as a viable reality. I just love the idea. I just think it's such a wonderful idea. It reminds me of a scene. It resembles a scene in my Roswell trilogy books. If you've read them, you'll know that. I don't know if the organizer of the event has read them, but Storm Area 51 has zero chance of success. I promise you that. Even if all 600,000 people turn up, or more at the room, I think, since that figure was released. Their plan is rather crude. They plan simply to rush towards the base very quickly. They're going to run as fast as they can towards the base. they've obligingly told everyone in advance what they plan to do and when they plan to do it, including Area 51 security. Yeah. They say it's 20th of September, guys. We'll be coming. Be ready for us. Yeah. Now, there's nothing said in the arrangements about weapons. I assume they would prefer people involved to carry out this invasion unarmed. Well, that's futile, because the base is protected by very heavy military hardware, including the aforementioned camo dudes. They've got helicopter gunships, fighter jets operated by the US Air Force. Only a highly organised team with similar firepower could ever succeed in capturing the base. And what's more, you'd have to plot it in secret so as not to alert the security forces. You have to catch them off their guard, catch them unawares. Now, I'm not actually opposed to such subversive violent action, what I've just described. That is, an armed assault on Area 51 by people who know what they're doing and with the right equipment, the right weapons. And the reason I'm not opposed to that is because, considering the abusive actions of the government against the people of the world for so long, it could be classified as the lawful use of force, and that's how I portray it in the Roswell novels, in fact. Now, if you remember the old man at the old people's home that Richard Dolan interviewed, an old CIA officer, President Eisenhower, according to him, wanted to do exactly that, wanted to invade Area 51 and take it over. And you might argue, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would an American president invade an American base? That's silly. It's contradictory. But it's not. It's not contradictory at all, because there was and it's best explained by the lawyer who was representing Robert Frost and his colleagues. Now, he was it's a class action lawsuit by some men who served at Area 51 and became very ill. Now, his lawyer made a comment in a documentary, and he said, "I don't know if there are aliens at Area 51. My clients never saw any, but it wouldn't surprise me. You must realise that that place is a legal black hole. It operates above congressional oversight, above executive oversight. Hell, even the US president himself cannot enter it without permission. One is forced to consider whether it is even part of the United States at all, and might instead be an enclave of some kind of super government." Astounding words, I'm sure you'll agree, but they are potentially accurate. Now, it is possible to travel close to Area 51. You just drive up the boundary to Groom Lake Road, on the Groom Lake Road to the boundary. I hope to do it one day. And there are tourist buses that go there from Las Vegas, but we don't currently have the means to force our way onto the base. And so, if you don't, the best thing to do is to use information to make as many people aware of the base and the government secrecy in general, and don't do anything silly, because honestly these people will get themselves killed. The late great Anthony J. Hilder used to hold peaceful protests at the warning signs at Groom Lake, and these were filmed and they did a lot of good, and that's the best thing to do. In fact, there's been since this came out, there's been a release by the government. They have warned UFO enthusiasts, I hate that word, but they've warned them against storming Area 51. And the US Air Force has given a word of caution, warning them that the military stands ready to protect America and its assets. Well, as you've just heard, perhaps Area 51 is not an asset of the American people or the government, but a spokeswoman for the US Air Force said, Area 51 is an open training range for the US Air Force, and we would discourage anyone from trying to come into the area where we train American armed forces and carry out other classified operations, of course. The US Air Force always stands ready to protect America and its assets. So they're basically saying it's not a good idea to do it, and well, I have to agree. Right, so now we come on to a number of new productions that are in the works in the UFO and alien exopolitical field. Now, the Aerial Phenomenon movie is finally coming out. Now, I've had to wait for this one almost as long as you've got to wait for Cable Green. The Aerial Phenomenon movie has been in production, in the workings. It's sort of been in sort of jumping around. It's bouncing around the cutting room and everything for a little while now. Now, I first heard about this about 3 years ago because Randy Nickerson, who is a really, really good guy, he did a really, really interesting lecture, and I really, really liked what he was saying. Said he was working on this documentary. Now, this is a film about the Aerial school phenomena of Zimbabwe. Now, this is very interesting because it happened a long time ago. In fact, it's happened way back in 1990s. Oh yes, 1994. In fact, September 1994. And I've talked about this before. But basically, at a school called the Ariel School, a group of children, there was over 40 of them, I believe, had an amazing experience. They were out playing in the playground, and basically a flying saucer landed, and some aliens got out, and they got to talk to them. Now, this was investigated by Dr. John Mack. He travelled all the way to the school and interviewed the children. There's some really, really good interviews. You can get them online, and he's absolutely convinced that they were telling the truth, and I agree with him. What's more, one of the reasons I'm pretty sure they were telling the truth is those children who are now adults, they're in their late 20s, early 30s now, they have spoken about what happened to them. They've spoken about the whole thing, and they say they stand by their story. I mean, Randall Nickerson and his colleague have tracked these children down. Now, most of them have left Zimbabwe, as people tend to do, because Zimbabwe is a very unhappy country for political and economic reasons. So anyone who really can afford to get out the country has got out the country. And in fact, a quarter of the people have left the country since the Mugabe regime came to power in about 1980. So they're all living abroad. But you know what? They stand by their story. They stand by what happened to them. How many adults stand by stories if it's all a big trick? Because the skeptics will say these kids made it up. That's what they'll say. How many tricks would you my adult listeners, right, my adult viewers, how many of you stand by tricks that pranks you carried out at school when you were little kids, do you still maintain were real now? No, there's a lot more to this. I'm really, really interested. I can't wait to see this film. I've actually written to Nickerson, asked him if he wants to be on the Palmo show, but he hasn't got back to me. But if you're watching, Randy, please get in touch, because I'd love to interview you, because I'm fascinated by this case. Investigated by the late, great Dr. John Mack. Amazing chap. Sadly missed. I wish, shame he's not around to see this. And I see Darcy Weir has a new movie out. It's his latest in his Beyond the Spectrum series. It's Malsan's UFO Files. I've got to see that. I really do recommend Beyond the Spectrum, the original one, and Beyond the Spectrum Taken, so Being Taken. Do check those out. Now, if you listen to Panmo Radio, you'll know that I do regularly interview Darcy when he gets new videos out. So I'll make sure I get in touch with him about this particular one, and hopefully you'll find out more about this on her Panmo Radio. But well done, Darcy. He's a filmmaker from Canada. He's got some really interesting stuff out there. Appreciate what you do, mate. All strength to you. Hope this one does well. It's available on Amazon Prime, I believe. And now this is the question I'm sure a lot of you are going to want to know, and indeed a lot of people have asked me this question already. Unidentified. Ben, what's your take on it? I now have to confess to you, I've not watched it. I know, I'm sorry. I should have done. When I first heard about it, I talked about it with Dave Altman, and he was saying, Ben, again, you've got to see it. It's great. And I thought, right, yeah, sure. But the other things just got in the way. It's not that I'm not interested. You know how much I'm interested in this. But other things have just got in the way. Now, there's been reviews of this already posted, and Stephen Bassett has written a very angry article about one of the people who has reviewed the show. I don't know if I should go into details now. It's actually an article that was published on Intercept magazine, and Steve is very, very angry about this review. And I'll probably cover this in a future program, actually. I'm not going to say anything now, simply because I have not seen Unidentified. I know the series is almost finished. I know UFO Jesus has been making a video about every single series, and Richard Dolan has reviewed it, and oh dear, it's so much. The thing is, it's partly my illness and partly other things I've had to do. So I hope you'll accept that as an excuse. But in the next UFO Disclosure video, I'll tell you more about it. And I might even make some special theme videos about the Unidentified UFO TV series, because I've talked about it on previous videos, actually. And it does look good. It looks really interesting. If you've seen it, well, let me know what you think. Right, we've got a bit of a SETI update now, which I will be covering in the next time I present my SETI talk, which I'm actually presenting live at the Swansea UFO Network on the 30th of this month. If you want to come to that, it's I can't remember the actual address. Just go to sufon.com, Swansea UFO Network. It's the 30th of July. This is a response to an article in Live Science magazine. No sign of aliens in the closest 1,300 stars. Hunt funded by Russian billionaire reveals. They didn't say fails, but they said reveals. Now, Steve's not happy with this, Steve Bassett, and I'm going to just go through an article he's written in response to this. As you know, I have a lot of interest in the SETI subject and its relationship with UFOs. I've done an entire talk called SETI and UFOs, which is the one I'll be doing in Swansea. So, of course, just to give you a background, if you've not seen that talk, Yuri Milner is a Russian oligarch who's funded a SETI project, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, basically trying to pick up aliens by pointing telescopes at the sky. And I thought it's got to have guaranteed success. But so far, no good. Anyway, Steve responds to this article from the 19th of June, 2019 in Live Science. And I'm not going to imitate Steve's voice, alright, because it's just be so stupid, alright. I'll just tell you when I'm speaking, when he's speaking. The SETI concept, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, first emerges simultaneously with the launch of NASA via the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958. Me talking now. That's true, actually, although it was actually Carl Sagan's I believe in 1966 he wrote a book called, I can't remember the title, but anyway, that's what really popularised the idea. But it was the Order of the Dolphin met in 1962. That's where Carl Sagan and Frank Drake and that got together. Anyway, back to the text. Over the next 6 decades, SETI programs will be financed with millions of dollars of taxpayers' funds. When Congress grew weary of this, private funding was obtained. Later, that government money would again turn up. Me talking now. Yes, the private funding is kind of what Yuri Milner's doing, this breakthrough initiative that he's running. It has always been, I mean, the SETI's not one project, it's more a scientific movement. Back to the text. The legendary Stanton Friedman eventually coined the substitute acronym, Silly Effort to Investigate. Me talking now. That's typical of Stanton's wit, actually. Yeah, I mean, as you know, if you watch regularly and if you have anything to do with UFOs, you'll know that Stanton Friedman died. It's very sad we lost him. Back to the text. Stanton was being too kind. The SETI programs, based on the amount of funding and length of tenure, are the greatest scientific fraud in human history. Me now. Well, Steve, that's that is quite something. I think there are worse scientific frauds than this. However, it's a bloody big scientific fraud. You're absolutely right. Certainly in the top 10. Back to the text. In 1958, the US government had to create a civilian space program. The Russians were leading in space exploration, and the US had to respond. A secret military space program was not going to get the necessary vast sums of money needed. The public was excited about exploring space and aware of the extraterrestrial concept. They would support a civilian space program, but the US government had a big problem. When NASA was established, persons who mattered were quite aware. Since 1940 there was already an extraterrestrial presence engaging the planet. This truth, along with all research and investigations, were embargoed under the highest classification within the military intelligence complex. Military intelligence complex, that's me talking now, as opposed to military industrial complex, but I'm sure there's a crossover there. Back to the text. NASA was going to generate more public interest in the extraterrestrial hypothesis and in the UFO phenomena being reported worldwide. The government could not appear to ignore the ETH, as that would raise suspicion. A program to search for extraterrestrial radio signals that would almost certainly never be found was the solution to their problem. SETI would be the buffer to keep pressure off NASA, avoid awkward questions, and keep lying to a minimum. Over the subsequent decades, SETI built radio telescopes that do have use value, and perhaps elevated the science of radio telescopy. A number of scientists made comfortable livings was that worth the hundreds of millions in 2019 dollars in taxpayer and private funding, given the entire program was a con game in service of the government imposing the truth embargo? No. That said, PRG views the creation of SETI programs in 1958 as a matter of national security, as a legal, albeit tasteful, policy. The threat of nuclear war was real. However, in the years, SETI scientists, likely making north of $100,000 per year, would appear in tandem with extraterrestrial phenomena researchers, often making nothing to debunk their work and demean their credibility. Not nice. PRG has often said, one way or another, the truth makes fools of us all. This includes scientists whose careers were wasted and legacies destroyed. It also includes Russian billionaires. Somehow Yuri Milner managed to ignore 60 years of evidence amassed confirming the extraterrestrial presence and give $100 million to keep on searching for these elusive ET signals. One can only wonder what Mr. Milner's mood will be in when he learns the SETI program was a fraud from the day it was created and remains the same to this day. End of text. That's interesting then, Steve, because I mean, I don't quite agree with you that the SETI program is doomed to failure. In fact, I believe it is quite likely to succeed at some point. However, as I say in my own talk on the subject, there is the streams of information, and the implications between the success of whether it's ufology or SETI are completely different. And the success of the former could have a knock-on, a positive effect on the latter. That being said, I don't disagree with you over the fact that SETI was used as a diversion from the UFO phenomenon. I don't doubt it for 1 minute. And I'll say more about this, I think, in my SETI talk, which is going to be different from the last time I gave it. That was at the Awakening conference. I think it's going to be slightly different because, and this is an example of what I'm talking about. If you want to read Steve Bassett's article, it's on the Paradigm Research Group, www.prg.org. And to finish this latest round of news in the world of UFOs, disclosure and exopolitics, something a bit more light-hearted here. We have Lost Time, which is a double dry hopped Galaxy Pale Ale. It's a new kind of beer from the Woodstock Inn Brewery. And feel free to be, I like that, yeah. Now this is a New England style pale ale, limited until it's gone, and made with 100% more New Hampshire. And the reason this has come out, this is a special limited edition new pale ale, as you heard, and it is powered by New Hampshire, as you said there. And it's a specially themed beer created because of the Betty and Barney Hill event. Now here we go. On the night of September the 19th, 1961, while driving through Lincoln, New Hampshire on Route 3, a young couple experienced a close encounter of the fourth kind. It's like an abduction, yeah. Much like their story, you'll find this yellow, hazy, juicy, bright and tropical New England style ale otherworldly. I wonder if they'll export it, because, you know, I just fancy some of that right now. Of course, the Betty Barney Hill case is very, very interesting. I recommend the lectures by Kathleen Marden, Betty Hill's niece, where she talks about this, and the books written by her and Stanton Friedman, and of course the testimony from the witnesses themselves, because they've been wrongly called the first ever alien abductees. They weren't the first ever, but they were first ever to speak publicly about it and be covered in detail by the media. And I'm very glad that in testament, as a memorial to this amazing event, both of them have died now. Barney died a few years after the event, and Betty, I think, died around about 2000. They have produced this wonderful, wonderful brew here, which if you manage to get hold of some, if you're in New Hampshire, or like I say, if they export it, that would be great. I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Right, now, there's an awful lot to think about over what has been happening over the last month or two in the world of UFOs. And there's an awful lot of contention, there's a lot of controversy. And I think there was a time when the differences of opinion within our community could have been dealt with through dialogue, but there's a different atmosphere now in our community, which I'm very sad about, because what's happened is people are doubling down within their tribalist opinion groups now and treating those who disagree with hostility, rather than engaging in dialogue between people with different views. And maybe that's human psychology, maybe it's deliberate, maybe it's inevitably going to happen, or perhaps it is an attitude that has been instilled deliberately by the government to try and derail what our duty is and what our mission is here in the UFO investigation and activist community. There are some happy exceptions, I must say. I'm glad that there are. It's without that, I'd wonder what the hell I was doing, because at the moment, my list of my friends are peeling off like banana skins, and for reasons I talked about Jordan Sather. I mean, maybe that's got something to do with it. A lot of them just dump me without even telling me why. It's probably something related to that. As for the alien autopsy, I am now, as I explained, I'm reassessing the whole situation. I have to. I think we all have to. I'm not saying I definitely changed my mind on this. I'm not saying this is not some spur of the moment road to Damascus experience where I'm now side by side with Colin Wilfred on this whole issue. It's not. It's sad, but I'll come on to this later, but everyone's expected to be 100% sure of everything in this world, and I'm not. I have my doubts now about my previous position on the alien autopsy, but those doubts are not to the point where I think the alien autopsy is definitely real. And interestingly, there has been an update since I did my interview with Colin. Richard Dolan has been in touch with Kit Green, and Kit Green has confirmed that what he said, in that he has been quoted correctly in the memo. That memo was from him. So it's very, very different from the situation of the Wilson notes, where we've yet to get confirmation from the authors and subjects of the Wilson notes. Kit Green has confirmed that was him. But what he said is, firstly, there was a bit of confusion because Richard Dolan did an interview with Kit Green. Green said he didn't want it to be filmed. He didn't want it recorded. What he wanted was there was a bit of confusion because at first Richard Dolan said Green gave him permission to release a transcript of it. This has now apparently was a mistake. Dolan has now done a follow-up on the free section of his website, where he says that Kit Green's actually said no, he doesn't even want a transcript released, and Richard's allowed to write a summary, he's allowed to write a report, maybe a précis of what was said, but the words Kit Green uttered he doesn't even want put down in text form. However, he has given Dolan a hope, because he said he wants to come back and do another interview possibly in a few months, so we'll be waiting for that to come. So we could be... What I find is people tend to get bolder and bolder as they go through this sort of thing. They start off being completely anonymous, then they come out of the closet, then you see like pictures of them, then you see their words, then you see their video, then you see their audio, then you see their video. They tend to become bolder as they go along. You find this with amateur internet users as well, who start off as anonymous and then things gradually pick up. What Green has said, Richard has confirmed, is that Green is now saying that he's not saying that the Santilli film was the alien autopsy that he saw, because he never actually saw video. He saw stills from what he said was a real alien autopsy that resembled the Santilli film. He's now not saying the Santilli film was what he saw, the stills from the Santilli film. He's saying the Santilli film looks very similar to what he saw. If that is the case, then, well, that obviously changes things, because you've got to wonder, well, why was the Santilli film made at all? Was there a suggestion that it might be needed? For the reasons I've stated in previous videos, the need, in a sense, to bring out some kind of discrediting disinformation before the real stuff hits. Now, I always thought it was stuff from Russia and the alien interview and things like that were coming out. The government knew they were out there, they knew they were floating around, they knew sooner or later the public will get hold of them. Oh my God, what we're going to do? I know, let's put out a fake video, or at least help some people publicise a fake video when they made it themselves, and streamline it on its way to success, and make sure that gets out there first and give it massive amounts of publicity, and then shoot it down amidst all that sheen of publicity. So when the real stuff inevitably hits the public's perception, they'll just go, oh God, not another fake alien video. Students make them, you know. When, as you know, I am much more certain that the alien interview is a real alien, and the stuff from Russia, I think it's unmistakable. These are real. But they've had a fraction of the publicity of Alien Autopsy. A fraction. And I thought that's why. It's because the Alien Autopsy was put out there as disinformation. But according to this latest information, it could be that they knew that Kit Green's was out there and was talking, or was planning on talking, which is why they put the alien. You know, maybe Kit Green specifically they disinformed, because Kit Green was did say, you know, this wasn't just any old alien film. This was kind of like what I saw. Now Colin is a bit dubious about this. He is saying that Kit Green changed his story, and that's literally true. Green has, in a sense, changed his story, because in the memo it was, maybe he didn't mean it the way it meant to be, maybe he wasn't clear enough, but in the memo I think he said, yeah, this is what I saw, this is what I saw, not this looks like what I saw, this is what I saw. Tricky that, isn't it? Now, we've got to come back to TTSA. I've always said, and this has always been this is something I had to tackle in my series of novels, the Roswell trilogy, that the most likely disclosure, especially when it first happens, the most likely disclosure we will get is fake disclosure. And my thoughts at the time were that it would be someone would come out and say the aliens are bad, because it was Bryce Zabel actually who gave me this idea, because he did his talk and he said, well, it could sound the aliens are actually evil and the government have been lying to us when they know the aliens are evil. If that is the case, then we'll just have to forgive the government and unite behind them in order to repel this alien threat. So I said to Bryce, I said, well, Bryce, what if the government say that maybe what if the aliens are not evil, but the government say they're evil just so that we'll forgive them, to dig themselves out that hole? It's the only thing any spin doctor could really come up with, could they? Could he? So that was a good question, and it's made me think an awful lot. Now, I did a very, very good interview, and I'm not going to put a bloody link in the description box to this. Just you find it, okay? It's my last show. It's my last interview on the Kev Baker show. It's called UFO Disclosure. It's the one I did a couple of weeks ago. Look it up. You'll find it. It's all my interviews with Kev are there. I'm going on again in a few days. It was the one before that. But you'll know it's the one about UFO Disclosure and TTIP. Now, we discussed the possibility that TTIP and TTSA, ATIP and TTSA are some sort of hoax. The whole thing is some kind of massive piece of disinformation. And we both watched a video by the dark journalist John Greenwald, not to be confused with Glenn Greenwald. And he raises some interesting questions, and we have to go into this. Now, first and foremost, the presence of Hal Puthoff. Now, his name keeps coming up again and again. As I've said, he's in this alleged letter that Willard Miller wrote. His name comes up in this memo that we've just been talking about with Kit Green. The name Hal comes up over and over again. And Hal Puthoff is a man with very close connections to the military intelligence complex. He was a CIA. He was in the CIA. He was at Stanford Research Institute, where he worked on remote viewing, which led to a black budget remote viewing program. If you, as Colin was saying, Perceptions by Ingo Swann, do read that book. It's very good. Ingo Swann was one of the people involved in it. He wrote a book telling him about his experiences as a CIA remote viewer. Another one was Uri Geller, who of course is a household name and has made a very lucrative career as a popular entertainer. However, he confessed to John Ronson, the journalist, back in 2003. And in 2013 he made a full confession to the BBC, and he admitted he'd been a remote viewer for the CIA and for Mossad, and he'd taken part in various he'd taken part in the 6-Day War and things like that. Now, it turns out that Eric Davis is not just a colleague or an associate of Hal Puthoff. He actually, along with working with Bob Bigelow and NIDS, he also works for Hal Puthoff's company. So he's an employee of Hal Puthoff. Now that is something we should be. It adds to the suspicious element of Hal Puthoff. It seems strange that this guy would be a CIA agent who worked on remote viewing, and suddenly he comes out, because he's old now, he was young when he did this, this was back in the early 70s, he comes out of retirement essentially to work on TTSA and be the advisor to Tom DeLonge and the other management people in the management there. My monitor is acting as a part of a... Here we are. That is something we've got to be worried about. There are several other people that... In fact, the TTSA board, there are weird things going on with almost everybody, every name on that board. There's something you could say about them. Now, Richard Dolan assures us that just because this CIA is on their CV doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't mean they're automatically bad people. And I actually see where he's coming from here. And I think TTSA deserves a chance. However, it is something. TTSA and other people and their supporters should not be surprised when people ask awkward questions. Now, for example, at the moment we know that Luis Elizondo was in the Department of Defense. We know he was at the Pentagon. There's a guy called Chris Sherwood who's confirmed that, but he's not confirmed yet that Luis Elizondo was a part of ATIP. Now, we need an update on that. I think we need him to update that situation. Another thing that Sherwood said is that the footage you've seen from the pilots should not have been shown. And as I think I mentioned this on a previous video, I certainly mentioned it on the Kev Baker show. Maybe I'll dig out these bloody links. Or I'll dig out I'll dig out the Alien Autopsy and Kev Baker for you. All right, it'll be in the description box. Make a note, Ben. Make a note. I'll make a mental note. It won't be there now. But Sherwood did say, and indeed this is actually true, the footage was not published by the Department of Defense. The footage was published by the To the Stars Academy. So it's come indirectly from the US military. Now, I'm not saying it's not US military footage. I mean, for that to be the case, then the pilots like David Fravor and the other pilots and the other witnesses, the guy on the ship, what's his name, Kevin Ryan, or whatever his name is, the guy on the ship, the radar operator, they would all have to be lying. And I don't think they are. I don't think they are lying. I've looked into this, I've studied the cases, I've looked into both sides, I don't think they're lying. But again, this needs to be sorted out. The Department of Defense needs to confirm that. I mean, Sherwood has said this, he did say that this stuff shouldn't have been released. Is that a confirmation that this is Department of Defense footage? Classified Department of Defense footage? I don't know. Maybe it is. Another thing that Greenwald has actually come up with, and he's done this through his speciality, which is Freedom of Information Act requests. Bob Bigelow, of course, as we know, was a part of ATIP from 2007 to 2012. He was working on the wreckage and analysis of the pieces, the fragments that were found. But he continued to be paid after 2012 when the project shut down. So he still had his Department of Defense salary after that. Now you've got to ask, well, why is that? Now there may be an innocent explanation for it. He may have some kind of severance pay deal going with them. I don't know. He may have taken out some kind of contract which meant that he was entitled to extra money. I don't know. That's something that needs to be answered. But it's just a thing we need to know. If it's all disinformation, then what's it for? Again, I mean, you've got to understand that this whole Mark Pilkington line, this very fashionable idea that, oh, there's no UFOs. I know that's not what Mark Pilkington specifically says, but he implies it. There's no UFOs. The UFO is a piece of neo-mythology deliberately seeded by government intelligence agencies to launder much more down-to-earth secret projects. So you see a spy plane in the sky, the government can tell you, oh, shut up and don't say anything about it. They don't do that. Oh, no, there's a UFO up there. Look, everybody come and look at this UFO. Yes, I know it looks a bit like a spy plane, but it's actually a UFO. It doesn't make sense. And that kind of, drawing someone's attention towards something with the intention of ultimately deflecting it away is a very risky gambit. And just think how that could backfire. I don't believe that this is what TTSA and ATIP are, if they are some form of disinformation. If it's disinformation, it's something very, very different. It's something a lot more subtle. It's something hiding something else. And you've got to ask yourself what that is. And you've got to ask yourself, if UFOs don't exist and there are no aliens, it just doesn't make sense that they would lie about something like this. And the same goes for other previous pieces of disinformation, some of it well known, such as the Avery Network, the Benowitz affair, which I talked about on the previous video. Richard Dolan takes quite a nonchalant view on this. He says that the people involved, yes, some of them are ex-CIA, other things, you know, something, all the points I've brought up, all the points that John Greenwald has come up with. Richard Dolan says, don't worry, that's what we would expect. And he may be right. He may be right. It could be that we are being overly cynical here. And in fact, it's kind of quite trendy to be it's very trendy these days to be overly cynical. It's almost like a badge of honour. And you have to be 100% certain of everything, right? If you know, people say, oh, stop sitting on the fence, Ben, things like that, right? As it's a sign of strength to just say, I am 100% certain that TTSA is completely controlled by the CIA, and anyone who says otherwise is less intelligent and less sophisticated and less courageous than I am. Look at me, everyone, look how wonderful I am. That is quite, unfortunately, a very prevalent attitude, and it's part of this bad atmosphere that I talked about in our community. These warring factions that seem to be breaking out everywhere, the breakdown of communication. I'm not going to apologise for not being certain, and I will not tolerate people who try to pour scorn on me for not being certain. I don't think we can be certain right now. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of sensibility, it's a sign of common sense if you look at this and say, well, it could be this or it could be that. But of course you can't win, can you? You can't win with the "but can't you see it, Ben" brigade. You just can't win with them. So we need more transparency from TTIP. From TTIP. I did a video about TTIP. We need more transparency from the TTSA. We need them to be more open about what they're doing. We need now Tom DeLonge. Don't include Tom DeLonge. I think is a very sincere and honest person. I know someone who knows him and says, yeah, he really believes in this. And I know someone who's been to his bookshop in California, and he's a true believer. He's a true enthusiast, just like me. But generally, the whole organisation needs more transparency. Luis Elizondo, what I would do in his position, Lou, if you're watching, if Lou Elizondo is an honest man, and he may well be, then he needs to go to the board of TTSA and say, look, I need to be able to give out more information because people are not believing me. People are asking whether I'm for real, and they're right to ask whether I'm for real. Let me prove myself here. Let's release more information. Let's release more information that confirms the information we've already released and the claims we've already made. That's what I would do. So, now the storm. The storm is two things in this video, as I said. It's the storm Area 51, but it's also the possible storm that is coming, which you've heard about. And it's not just about UFOs, it's about all the other things which the deep state is involved in, which might possibly be coming to an end. Disclosure is not just the disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. It's so much more. It connects to 9/11. It connects to, well, the reptilians. It connects to, and this is the biggest secret of all, bigger than all the others, the true scale and severity of the abuse of children. And I'll say more about that in another video, but we really are seeing cracks in the dam. And as I've said in my film, Why 2016 Matters, and maybe I'll include that as a third link in the description box if I remember. Where's my pen? I need to make a note. Those three things: Alien Autopsy, Kev Baker, Why 2016. Right. Then we met with this. If the storm comes, the storm which is about to happen cannot happen without the disclosure of the ET presence. Disclosure with a capital D. It has to happen. I'm starting to talk like UFO Jesus without the hair and beard, aren't I? We may move into the post-disclosure world. Now, QAnon released a a post, and I believe it's one of the real ones, about Roswell. He said, highest classification, think about the vastness of space. In response to, what about Roswell, Q? Someone asked him a question about Roswell, and as Q normally it's just like one word, Roswell, question mark. And he said, we're not alone, think about the, I can't remember the exact words, but I did cover it in a previous video in this series, but paraphrasing, he said, the highest classification, think about the vastness of space. I think Q there was essentially confirming the Roswell incident, confirming highest classification, again, confirming UFO secrecy, think about the vastness of space, we're not alone. If some of the QAnon posts are real, and I believe some of them are, then that is virtually a confession, isn't it? It's virtually a confession from someone on the inside of what we're talking about here. What we need is to get the inside outside. And it all happened, I believe it all happened at the same time. I don't see how one domino in this pile can fall without the others falling as well. And goodness me, that's something I want to see more than anything else in the world. And if we do see it, you can be sure you are going to hear an awful lot about it. You can hear an awful lot about it from me on Panwo TV. Thank you for watching, all of you. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.